Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of Exploring the Process. We've got a special guest here with us this week, Rich Vanderberg, who very excited to speak with. We've been trying to get him kind of on the show for probably we started conversations about a month ago, and it's funny that Keith McCullough on Monday mentioned sort of the 3-star general and that kind of thing. So I guess this is just sort of military week inside of the head jack community, which is always a good conversation to have, because I know we have a lot of, my uncle always told me you're never well, he was Canadian Navy. So he's like, you never really ex-military. So just retired military personnel here. So Rich, his background is a now retired U.S. Air Force pilot. He was with them from, I believe you said 81 to 2004. And then he transitioned over to flying for UPS. So he did a lot of international, to kind of travel with UPS and retired in 2019. So he's now officially retired. So congratulations, Rich. But the great thing with that is that he's sort of, I guess, learned from and felt the wealth escape, I guess perhaps is the word, of both the 2000 and the great financial crisis, and really has found a better way in the last, I'd say, you kind of mentioned certainly 5 to 10 years, Rich, and kind of your growth. So really excited to get into that. And for those that aren't aware, Chris Moyer also has a military background. He was in the British Navy and was a submariner. I don't know what I know you had a rank, but I don't know what it was, or like what portion of the submarine were you focusing, Chris?
So I was an electrical engineer.
I knew that, actually. But awesome. Well, welcome, boys, and thank you again for sitting down with us, Rich. We're really excited to learn more about kind of how you've applied some of the things that you've learned or forgotten, right, or to forget, as a pilot, and then as you've sort of tweaked your process to date.
Well, really happy to be here, Rob, and thanks for all your sessions. And boy, there's a lot of brain power with whoever joins, and that's really neat to see. So you got to be careful letting the pilot talk about himself, because that could last for a very long time. Many stereotypes with pilots. They can be type A, they can be real assholes, attention to detail, perfectionists. I can tell you that's somewhat true for the most part, but there are exceptions. So there's type A, type B. I'm actually a type B person, but I can quickly go to type A just for reference. And the nature of flying would get you there. So what I found fascinating throughout my career, I started at the U.S. Air Force Academy back in '77 as a young, clueless 18-year-old. And the structure of the military was fantastic. The culture of integrity was there. There was an honor code that was instilled into us throughout the 4 years. At the time, I thought it was a bunch of BS, but I look back at that honor code as extremely formative in getting your moral bearings. So the honor code was essentially, we will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate anyone among us who does. And it's a huge deal, because if you were caught just borrowing somebody's vinyl and forgot to turn it back to his room, that's an honor violation. And then you get a trial by your peers to see if they will accept you to stay there at that academy for the rest of your career. So that was a huge impression. So there's a lot of talk of integrity and character, and I can tell you it does mean something. When I was flying in the military, integrity was everything. The environment, you could trust your teammates, everybody was on the same page. It was integrity first, excellence before self, excellence in all we do. I was integrity first, service before self, excellence in all we do is kind of the mantra of the military. So surviving as a pilot has a lot of parallels to trading. In looking back, I've flown 40 years, 12,000 hours, and believe it or not, that's not very much compared to other pilots who have done more than that. So
Right.
when you first start out, you wonder, what in the hell am I getting into? No one cares what I do. I'm getting no gratification. The daily grind is torture. You have to get up to speed real quick to your craft. There are certain things you got to learn real fast. Otherwise, I guess that's the market. Otherwise, you die. So one of the things evolving through the pilot career, you have to learn how to trust your flight instruments, for example. Mm-hmm. Really tough thing to do. It's the most unnatural thing for a guy to learn how to fly. But once you get it and the light bulb clicks, it might take 1 year, it might take 5 years, but you have instructors guiding you along the way. You have your mentors. So the survival part of piloting, I can compare that to trading. You got to know the particular times and particular moments when something big is about to happen. So in flying, it's pretty easy. You know, you have critical phases of flight that you know about, your crew knows about. So, you know, you're going to launch a sub, you're going to port it. That's a pretty critical phase of flight. Takeoffs and landings are critical phases. Believe it or not, taxiing is a critical phase because you go to these busy airports. You make a wrong turn, that could be in 1 hour in the penalty box, and then you and your customers aren't happy about that delay. So yeah. a lot of expectations that are clearly straightforward. The expectations are not a mystery. You got to know your bold print or your underline. So what do you do if there's a fire or electrical problem or flight control problem? You have checklists for that. And so you're disciplined to run it. A little tougher than you might imagine. So there's a little saying, you know, if something happens, you maintain aircraft control, analyze the situation, land as soon as conditions permit. It sounds trite, but believe me, that is ingrained in the way pilots conduct their priorities. Should something serious happen, if something serious happens and there's a procedure for it, like God forbid there's ever a fire in the cockpit, but other emergencies like shutting down an engine, I've had my share of those. Those really aren't a big deal because they've been well tested. The procedures are straightforward. Your awareness is up there. You know there's something serious, you take care of it, you follow the procedures, and you live to fly another day. That's what it's all about. You got to survive, live to trade another day. That part is easy. The tough part is when these innocuous little light bulbs show up and everybody's, you know, it's like Pee-wee football. Everybody's looking at that little light bulb and then, well, who's flying the jet? And the priorities can be almost comical, if not tragic. If you ever read the book Ghost of Flight 411, the Everglades, you know, it was just one silly light bulb that took down an airplane. And so we learned from that, established really good crew coordination after that. So the survival part of flying has a big parallel to trading. Now, true, you do a mistake in the air, you might kill people and break stuff. That's a little more urgent. But you know what? The emotions of having that responsibility don't trigger me as much as watching a bad trade. My emotions can get up there. And I was really surprised to see that, where, you know, pilots are unflappable and they just strut through their airports and nothing phases them. But trading, the emotions can get you. So I just wanted to start with that, and then share the floor with Chris and whatever you have to say about that.
It was really interesting when you said about obviously being an engineer, you have to have a certain level of trust in your ground crew as well, right?
Absolutely.
Because it can take anything. I remember, so before you go and be a submariner, you have to spend a year on a ship first to kind of get your badges before you go and do submarine training. So I remember I was on a destroyer at the time, and we had to go, before the helicopter would take off, you'd have to go and do a FOD plot. So you have to go and look and make sure there's no stuff on the flight deck, there's no bits and bobs lying around, because it's obviously as soon as it started trying to take off, anything that got sucked into the engine. But the people that were doing that were like chefs and stewards, and you know, they weren't technically trained or anything. So you have to have your trust in everyone no matter what, because it can be anyone that could find that one bit that gets sucked into the engine or could have been sucked into the engine. It's yeah. So when you say your emotions are different, does it feel, having all the experience that you have, does it feel like you're not in control, or what is it?
That's a great point. The control aspect. When you're first learning how to fly, you're just totally overstimulated with multidimensional stuff happening, you know, up, down, left, right, all these systems getting thrown at you. But after a while, as your comfort level increases, your emotions go down. So in the trading environment, the aspect that I find fascinating, to embrace that uncertainty, that really took some time for me, because during a pilot career, you pretty much were in a reasonable amount of control. And things were predictable enough that if something happens, you have the wherewithal to deal with it. Now in the trading, you just never know. I mean, there's three ways that the trends go. They go up, sideways, and down. And that sideways consolidation can eat you up, and you think, oh, I got the bottom or I got the top, I'm ready to go long or short. And you know, now you enter some other dimensions like trading options, which I really like to do. You can decide, hey, what's the weather like? What's the market telling me? Weather is a big deal when you fly. Well, the market conditions are a big deal. You look at that volatility. Wow, what a difference in the market. You know, we almost trade like our last trade. You know, when we were in quad 2, everything just worked. And now with the VIX over 30, you know, that's severe turbulence.
Yeah.
You want to avoid that. That's the same thing with flying. Nobody likes to fly severe turbulence. And I've had my share where, you know, if the autopilot wasn't working, I could literally not read my flight instruments. It was so bad. And that's not a good feeling.
Yeah.
Definitely want to avoid that. Avoiding thunderstorms, avoiding wind shear. There's all kinds of threats that.
And I guess in part of that, you manage your flight plan before that, but anything can happen in between, right?
Exactly.
And that was one of the things, whenever people talk about, you know, what did I learn from the military, it's that we do exercises all the time, constantly exercise, fire drills, everything, electrical failures, a fire with an electrical failure, or this or that, or a fire over there that leads to something over here. And a bit like Mike Tyson, the few things that did go wrong when I was there, it was never anything like the exercises.
That's right.
It looked nothing like that.
It's like, yeah.
But I will say the military, as opposed to the civilian training, the military training was top notch. You did your exercises so much, everybody knew their shit. And it was a real pleasure to, you know, sometimes when you go through a difficult mission and it just clicks, there's some gratification that you cannot imagine what that's like. It's kind of like winning a championship or Super Bowl kind of thing. You know, when we flew, you know, the B-2s, the stealth bomber. I flew bombers most of my career. I started with the B-52, which was older than I was at the time. And I was only 23. These planes were made in 1956 to 1962. And I was born in 1959. So these planes are older than I am. Today, those H models are still flying, which to me is unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, you get your increases in technology. So when the B-2 stealth bomber came out, boy, I was putting my hand up. Yeah, get me on that. I don't care about my career. I just want to fly the stealth, because here I've been flying a jet with 30 years worth of chicken bones stuck in the bottom floors. And I get a brand new airplane smell with a B-2, where I was lucky enough to pick up. I was able to deliver 5 brand new jets from Palmdale, California to Whiteman Air Force Base. You know, you get that new airplane smell. I'll never forget that. That was such an honor to be able to do that, because you have all these engineers that, under the veil of secrecy. If you look at the flying wing, it's just a aerodynamic masterpiece, how it can be stealthy. The engines are concealed, so the burner cans aren't exposed to the surface there, missiles, with IR seeker heads or anything like that. And it's just an amazing aircraft. And by the way, Chris will be glad to know we actually had 2 Brit exchange pilots come and fly with us. And it was just a hoot because the culture was really good. And I'll tell you a real quick story because I'm also a musician. I play the piano, and the Brits, they said, okay, we're going to have this piano burning ceremony. I said, what the hell would you do that for? So they went out, they found this old lady who wanted to get rid of her piano. It was a piece of furniture, it wouldn't play. And they said, hello, ma'am, we're very interested in taking your piano off your hands. Oh, well, it hasn't been tuned in a long time. Oh, that's quite all right. This will suit us just right. And so they took the piano, they hauled it to the officers club, and they had their little ceremony. And then they went outside and they burned the piano. I said, why would you do that? You know why they did that?
No way.
It was to commemorate the World War II bombing missions. The piano players were crew members.
Yeah.
And if they got shot down, then they burned that piano, just like retiring a jersey. And I thought, wow, that's really something. And so we forget we're on the shoulders of giants and life is so good, but you think of what it was like just 60 80 years ago.
Rich, my wife's grandfather passed away on Friday, and so his funeral's tomorrow. But he was a Navy veteran in World War II.
Wow, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. It was a time. He was very peaceful. Basically died. Passed away in his sleep, which is wonderful, and he lived a very rich, long life. But it's those kind of things where I try to. The stories, right, and those kind of things. He was on, Navy. He was in the USS Mindoro, and he to Chris, when you were mentioning kind of like guys going out to the deck to help out, and my understanding, he actually spent a decent amount of time in the barber shop, so he was actually kind of like a barber and stuff like that. I think he sneaky did a lot more than that, but those were his stories. But even the barbers, they still got to go out on the deck. They got there, when things go wrong or when things go sideways, you still have your mission, you still have your job, you still it's really fascinating to see that, and then to see him kind of he ended up becoming basically a driller of sort of like of wells and like water mains and stuff like that for like for municipalities and things like that. And so the amount of kind of math and just the preparation ahead of time, because if that well blows, I mean, you're done, right? And like again, so it's just I think what I've noticed speaking with folks that have a military background is obviously just that process and that dedication to whatever the task is at hand. And as I mentioned earlier, I get to talk with Chris every day, and his dedication and focus to the task at hand and being able to really harness that energy to accomplish the goal that he's set. And then the most fascinating thing is when he gets there, he loves to just break it all apart and try to figure out, basically rebuild it together or find that next thing. And I'm like, Chris, we need to spend like a hair more time, like evaluating, what you just accomplished here. And he's like, no, I'm on to the next thing. But anyway, just Chris, I love you, man. But Rich, in terms of, investing and stuff like that, when did you really get into, you said you retired in 2019. So obviously you got, probably a bit more time for it now that you're, retired and not flying as much. But when did you really when did that switch happen for you where you're like, okay, either I'm managing my capital in-house, aka like I'm going to start doing it myself, or, when did you really start to apply, or get interested in investing and sort of applying it to your own portfolios and stuff like that?
So in 2007, all was well. All my portfolio that I didn't have a clue about, just turned it over to somebody, did fine. And then the great financial crisis happened, lost 45%.
Right.
And said, okay, why why isn't my advisor telling me this? What's going on? Shouldn't he have known?
Right.
And so this is kind of my second time, because I saw the .com bust as well, and that was pretty close to, in 2000, I was about ready to retire, and then from the Air Force.
Right. Yeah.
So that was my first taste with that swoon. And then, of course, it came back.
We talk about timing a lot, Rich, and I think it is interesting because I suspect that in 2000, you were still obviously in the Air Force, so probably your investing capital or the capital, a lot of that. I'm sure a lot. Shouldn't. I'm assuming that, and maybe I shouldn't assume, but that a lot of your kind of retirement was obviously managed more by the U.S. or basically by the pensions, right? Versus having,
absolutely,
right. So versus, 10 years later, when the great financial happens, you're now with UPS, you've either got a 401k or you've retired. So you're putting more, assets
right.
into kind of your, again, either additional retirement accounts or, your own, you just kind of have a bit more capital at disposal, right? I mean, you're later in your career. And so I suspect that's a huge difference, right? Whereas like, .com may not, obviously about it and it impacted you, but certainly not to the extent that great financial crisis did, just because of the circumstances and the timing of which that happened.
And they tell you the same thing. Don't worry about it. Do your dollar cost averaging,
right?
Put your contributions in weekly.
Which
you cannot time the market. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. You cannot time the market. And when you think about it, that's a con from the people who also cannot time the market, but they're going to get paid the fees to try to time the market on your behalf.
Correct.
So the epiphany for me was watching the '08. I just went, oh my gosh, I can't handle this. Pretty soon I'm going to retire, and that's 240% drawdowns. What the heck is going on? And so that's when I decided to roll up some sleeves. I took some courses from Online Trading Academy, and all in all, they're pretty good. But I got to tell you, they taught the moving monkey ways of managing money. And, to go through all that and then hear Keith talk, moving monkeys don't work. I said, what? That's exactly. So now I'm paying attention some more. So what I am learning through all that, you give credence to the smooth talkers and the con artists, and you don't even know you're doing it. Mm-hmm. But when you think about it, what I've learned since '08, and now that I'm taking responsibility, pilots love control. There's nothing better than pulling the levers on your own trades now. And I really dig that. But of course, the results vary. And one of the things that took me a long time to get used to was accepting losses. In the flying or military, you don't accept very many losses. And if you do, they're learning opportunities and then you move on. But with trading, you can lose 7 trades and make 3 win and still make money. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you use the 3-to-1, and then they're all, you get little loser, little winner, big winner. Hopefully you don't have any big losers. The math comes out to, you get 3 good winners and 7 losses, you can still make money. Mm-hmm. And that concept is really hard to appreciate until you have some reps under your belt to figure out, hey, you got to be comfortable with losing. You got to be comfortable with the uncertainty. It's nice to go in and out of trades, but are you doing it at the right time? For a long time, I would just show up to my keyboard and put on a trade. Well, that's like going into an airplane and then just take off. Like, what? You're not going to look at your environment? That's not too smart. So emotionally, I got to get in the trade. I got to put my money to work, and that'll crush you if you're not aware of, what is the alignment of the market. Yeah,
that's such a good point. And you're seeing it. Obviously today is a great, not today in particular, but just this environment right now with VIX north of 30. It's just a totally different environment as to when to put your capital work and when, the timing is so much more impactful in my opinion, or so much more. it gets, compounded, right? If you're wrong on your entry right now and VIX kind of shoots up to 38, then you're going to be real wrong. Versus, and conversely, if it goes from 36 to 28, you're going to be really right. And so it's the timing is really impactful. When did you find like Hedgeye, or when did you sort of transition over to some of their kind of investing style?
That's a good question. I think I found them when I was on Twitter, because I really was fascinated how you have all these brains on Twitter. If you can ignore the noise and all the politics and when people get mad, it doesn't even faze me anymore. It used to, but it doesn't faze me anymore, because I know all about losing up to now. And then it's all about surviving to trade another day, just
Completely.
like survive to fly another day.
Yeah.
I have not blown any accounts, and that you got to be good with. If you can survive 5-10 years without blowing an account, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah, it's very good.
Depending on what you're doing, you can do have a bucket. If you want to have your day trading, go for it. I've discovered that day trading is fun. I'm not especially good at it, but I like doing it.
Right.
But the investment side, where there's more of a macro look, I like doing that. And what I was missing after taking my, few courses, and then what Hedgeye linked to me was to know what that environment is. What is that weather? How come nobody told me we're going into this quad 4? Well, they don't know any better.
Yeah.
We have all these just data hounds just pouring over tons of data that there's no way I have time for. But if I can glean what the weather's like ahead, now I can decide position size, that sort of thing.
Location, aka which assets, have a better probability, higher probability of giving a positive return, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Because in my courses, they had a pie chart, and you had to be invested in TLT or Russell. And then, at least with Hedgeye is stay out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
These things are going to crush you if you're even in there. So that's that part that I really appreciated, where, the huge takeaways were particular times, particular moments mean more than averages. That's huge.
It's one of those things. It's like these static asset allocations. If you believe in humanity, then we're always going to come up with something new and clever. So if you can protect, so that everything will kind of go up in the end. So if you can stop the drawdowns, that's the biggest part. Stop the drawdowns, and then human ingenuity will take care of the rest. If along the way you can manage to pick that outperformed massively against this, well, that's great. But if you can stop taking those big, massive drawdowns, you're streets ahead of so many people.
I think Diego's players on the field really hit home to me too, where you're going to day trade and you're going to have your eyeballs looking through a straw at one trade. That's going to be a roller coaster ride. You're going to really freak out when it goes red, and you're going to be great when it's green, and you're not going to buy or sell when you're supposed to close it out. But if you have players on the field that can dampen those drawdowns or that volatility, and then just leave them alone, that's much better, and let you sleep at night, and then go have a life where you're not bolted on the chair. Maybe you can actually walk away from the screen, which is very healthy. Come back later and see how you're doing.
Yeah. Chris and I are big believers of walking away from the screens, having some time away from the screens, and filtering out the noise on Twitter. It's like, Chris, I think
I had a bit of a cull on Twitter. I've gone from 15 down to 8 now, I think.
Am I still in there? Am I still in a follow? I probably not. Just. I gotta make sure
you're number 8.
Yeah, I gotta bring the heat then. No, it's but yeah, it is funny.
And another aspect I want to point out on similarities, you probably heard the phrase hours and hours of boredom interrupted by sheer moments of terror.
Yeah.
So that definitely applies to both flying and trading. And the part of flying is the way you handle, the sheer moments of terror. You just have to be ready. You do your due diligence. You show up well rested. You know your shit. If you got to hit the books a little bit before you fly, you go ahead and do that. Well, it's the same thing with trading. You have your boring moments. And if you think about it, the moves in the market do not occur most of the time. They occur in very thin slices of time. So what are the odds that you're going to catch that? Well, they're not very good. So, if you want to do your study and you want to put your limit orders in or something like that, again, the patience gets rewarded. Oh, they'll never hit that stink bid. Guess what? It hit.
Yeah.
It just depends on your mood. If you want to hit a market order that day just because you walked up, well, then that's added risk. Did you really understand that environment? And I'm guilty of that as well. If I'm going 5 days without anything, I have a fix. I got to put something to work.
And then itchy finger to hit the button.
Right? I don't know, just put it in there and see what happens. That's a red flag. But I'm guilty of that, just like anybody.
No, I think
cycles where you want those wins. We got so addicted to those wins in quad 2. Now things are just all over the place. Yesterday was a prime example.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, yesterday's a prime example, right? Where almost all day, volatility is elevated. Volumes kind of mediocre to just slightly, kind of like trending in line with average volume, and price was just careening. It just kept moving down and down and down, and all those signals pointed to basically one thing: stay out of the market, and or basically just take some losses, right? And then last 45 minutes or so of trading, from 3:15 on in the US, it was just basically everything just reversed, and emotionally you could get really caught up in that, right? If you could either be like, okay, well, was my decision correct? Like this morning at 11:30, when I saw all of my signals and all my preparation was telling me just to take a small loss before it becomes a bigger loss, and then it's 4 hours later, whatever it is, all of a sudden you're like, okay, shit, do I need to get back in this market? Are we going back to 28? It's like, because there's this mentality right now, and the swings are so volatile, literally, because VIX is so elevated that if you miss it, you feel like you're just never gonna catch it. And it's so, I'm sure Keith has a saying, which I'm sure it's probably felt like he was staring you right in the face, Rich, was being comfortable being uncomfortable, right? It's like, and that's where it's like, okay, no, I mean, I was so, again, I was just like very at ease. Like last night when I was running through the numbers and everything like that, it was just, I made the right decision. Like I cut losses, right? Like, I cut some losses and I made the right decisions. I like raised some cash, and I don't know, what it is doing today, but when I was looking back at the tapes, I was like, no, I made the right move, right? Even if, I underperformed the market today, I made the appropriate moves in that time frame.
And that debrief is so important, because how many debriefs have you gone through, Chris, after an exercise or after a sortie or
exactly. Yeah. And
we would spend hours debriefing, even after an 8-hour mission. We'd go to the beer machine, sit down, and we'd hammer through the entire mission for another hour and a half.
It's one of those things. It's even though we're all amateurs here, trying to doing what we're doing, but so much of all these like the Twitter Spaces, the videos that I do with Rob, some of the videos that I've done on my own, is you can put a trade on, and right or wrong, if you just let it go and don't learn from it, like you can get it right for the wrong reasons.
Exactly.
Right. So just like you said, just by the coffee machine or at the bar later, just having like that extra little bit. It's like, hey, whatever such and such happened, like what happened really, what this, and you kind of hash out the little bits at the side as well, the little side convos where you're like, right, what really happened? How did we, like, what can we learn from this to make sure we don't do it again? And it's, if you let all these things just pass you by, all these hundreds of trades, and you don't have a think like what's actually going on, like you learn so much from those little bits. And that's why I enjoy having these conversations so much.
Yeah, you got to establish those templates that keep you out of trouble, for sure. And one more quick aspect I wanted to share as far as flying versus trading. It's the most obvious, underappreciated facet, I think, that ever exists. And I'm guilty of it as much as anybody else, but just follow the rules. Follow your rules, follow the rules. And the beautiful thing about trading, you don't really have a boss. Mr. Market is your boss, and Mr. Market doesn't care about you, good day, bad day, doesn't care about your emotions. Mr. Market is the best boss we can ever have. On the flying side, you can have good bosses, bad bosses, but with an environment of integrity and character, everybody knows the rules, they follow the rules, we have the trust. It's a very healthy working environment. So on the flying side, you're not going to get away with busting rules. You just aren't. It's not something, hey, did you take that P2 and, you're supposed to fly 1,000 feet over that stadium, you're going to fly 500? No, I'm not going to do that. There are folks who do, and they will shine their ass over it. They'll probably lose their careers over it just for that one dumb rule-breaking stunt, based on ego, or, hey, I was at my hometown. A lot of bad things happen if you do a flyby at your hometown. So follow the rules on that side is pretty easy, because there are some bad things that can happen. And if bad stuff happens and you broke the rules, you are in deep shit. You're going to have some explaining to do. Your career's on the line. You just don't want that. Now, on the trading side, you debrief your own trade. The first question I ever ask is, did I follow my rules? How many times do you think I can say yes? Surprisingly, not as much as I should. And it's amazing how we just kind of wink and wave. The comment that you made, Chris, don't get cute. Don't get cute with the market. That'll bite you. You can get cute and not even know it, but if you're going to get cute and not follow your rules just this one time, hey, you're one trade away from selling fruit at the exit,
I think as well, 2021 lulled a lot of people that even if they had some rules, that they kind of got away with not following them in 2021.
Absolutely.
To a certain degree. And now you're being shown that the rules are there for a reason. Even if they're like you said, even if they're your own rules that you've done for yourself, you made them for a reason, and you maybe got away with not following all of them last year. And now, if you keep going, as Keith said this morning, that it could go on until Q1 of 2023.
That's amazing.
Obviously a flight, I don't know how long your longest flight, but when I went to sea, we were going to sea for, 3 or 4 months. And what set in for us was, so we'd be underwater for 4 months, and there's a certain,
that's amazing.
You start to get, bad habits start to creep in.
Like literally,
yeah. So bad habits start to creep in, a bit like you said about, you've got all these phases. You've got the taxi phase, you've got takeoff. And that's the same for us. You'd have these periods right at the start where everyone's still hyper focused, and because you've just done all your exercises, you've maybe done 3 or 4 weeks of throwing the submarine around and setting it on fire and all sorts of stuff. Then you come back for a few days, and then you go on patrol. So you're kind of at this high level at the start, and then the worst part is in the middle, where you're kind of lulled into this sense of security that, well, we've been here for 6 weeks, we've kind of got everything. And a bit like you said about, the rogue little light that comes on is for us, because there's 168 of us, it's having the trust, because all the little watch keeping positions and things and checking freshwater tanks and all this kind of stuff, it's the little things that build up. So that one little check maybe that's not done, and because it's not handed over correctly to the next watch and the next watch and the next watch, 6 weeks later, all of a sudden it's like, well, what the hell's going on? Because, oh, but that's what we've always did, or we've always done it like that. You know, it's like there was little bad habits, or not even a bad habit, just not being done exactly as it should be. Starts to build up and build up. And then the worst thing for us is that it would come at a point, as it always does, when you're in this kind of, you're in the lull, you're in the false sense of security phase. Yeah, it's really interesting coming into this year. So
when I had the honor of being in the first class to graduate in the B2 when I came to Whiteman, so I was an instant instructor, and we had to develop the whole program almost without rules. We came in with a clean slate. And I don't know if you all start up anything from scratch, but it is a lot of work. And, you know, you'll quickly appreciate, if you don't have anything written down or codified, it ain't going to get done the way it probably should. Yeah. So you write these standards based on everybody's reading it and they're singing from the same sheet of music, so to speak. So, I mean, we almost felt like, I don't know, a teenager away from their home for the first time. It's like, wow, we can do whatever we want. And then all of a sudden, now wait a minute, you got this $1 billion asset.
You say $1 billion airplane.
Yeah. Which really, if any airplane I flew far exceeded my paycheck, so that part didn't faze me. But they did remind us, hey, you know, this is like first shot on the golf course right in front of the clubhouse. You want to make it good.
Yeah. And Jack Nicklaus, you know, Gary Player,
and they're all there. The old timers.
Yeah, exactly. All those boys are there,
that.
Right? Yeah. Arnie, they're all watching and judging your swing.
And they are. You were in this tight little fishbowl.
Yeah.
And so what was fascinating, I mean, most airplanes, you have what they call underlines or capitals, your emergency procedures, you have to memorize. By rote. So if something happens, you don't have to refer to the checklist, you just do it. Well, we didn't have any for the longest time because everything was automatic. It was unbelievable. But then, you know, people who didn't know anything about it says, well, you have to have it. It's like, well, everything's automatic. So our first bold print was, what happens if you get an APU fire? So that's an auxiliary power unit that you see on most airplanes. Automatic system monitor. So you're having a bold-face to tell you to do nothing is what you have.
I remember some of the old kind of maintainer handbooks, and they would have these flow charts like check this, check PSU this, and it would go all the way down, and you've maybe done 25 checks, and then at the end it says, please contact the maintainer. And I'm like, I am the maintainer. Like, what?
You're administrator. I am the administrator.
I've been here for 20 minutes.
I'm trying to solve this problem.
But going on that, that's something that me and Rob have talked about before. Of obviously, you had your prior experience before flying the B2, but we've talked before about having, you know, starting a notebook and things like that. And we've said before that you just have to start. You just have to start, because it'll be rubbish at the beginning, but you won't know what you have to change or what you need to add or take away, or I'm doing too much, I'm doing too little. You won't know that until you start. And there's only so much you can say on Twitter or on the arena or wherever. Oh, can you share what you do? And it's like, well, it doesn't matter what I do. It's about what you do. So you have to have your little, whether it's a checklist for going into a trade, or the things that you check every morning, or the things you check on a Sunday night heading into the next week. You only know for yourself what you're going to need, but you won't need until you start.
and what's important for you to execute, right? And to
Exactly.
feel comfortable being uncomfortable. I mean, I'm just going to keep reiterating that, Rich, right? Like, the way that I use my notebook is different than Chris. Chris uses it more as kind of like journal to kind of go through his checklist in regards to, when he's putting on a trade, and uses it in that regard, but he writes that piece down, that, and whereas I use it more as like the true definition of a notebook, which is like my notes, right? So I've got my risk ranges, all that kind of stuff, my notes, and it's my guide path. It's just, again, I just prefer, because when you mentioned sort of having to write stuff down, that's exactly, Chris, like we're on the same page here, because it's, I think if you don't write, you got to write a piece of your process down, whether it's excuse me, whether it's your notes every day that help guide you, or if it's like the journaling process, or if it's just your, kind of like your nightly kind of couple little, bullets in terms of like, here are the trades I made, this is why, et cetera. Again, it doesn't really matter, but to me, I see you have a pen in your hand. I'm waving mine around, Rich. I know you got your notebook there. Yeah, exactly. So, because I can see you referencing it. So, again, I think it's just one of these, it's a critical piece, and folks are like, wow, I got Excel or all that kind of stuff. And again, like, I'm not, I love Excel. I huge fan of Excel, or the computer in general. And it is I think there's definitely a hybrid there, but the notebook, I mean, is how I stay on top of it, to be perfectly frank with you, just in terms of knowledge, in terms of what's going on, where we are in the quad, what's kind of upcoming, just and I did share some of mine yesterday, just to give folks an idea of like what mine looks like. But I preface it being like, this is mine, like this is what works for me. It's not necessarily what works for you. And you just, so do you, I'm assuming you have it. Yeah, that looks like you have a notebook at least. Yeah.
Well, that's just it. You got to do you.
Yeah.
The stock picks, and depending on someone else for a process and then rules doesn't quite work, because the one who's accountable is not involved. You're delegating what you should be doing to someone else. And that's what hit me back in 2008. I said, this guy doesn't care about my money, doesn't care about me. He's just, and when I ask the questions, I'm not getting any satisfactory answers. And so what I've learned since then, and taking the notes and following all these brainiacs on Twitter, no one really knows. Okay. No. That's the dirty little secret. No one really knows what the hell we're in for. We're in uncharted waters here. And how the hell is this going to play out? No idea. But I know at my age, I got to protect that nest egg a lot more nimbly than maybe you guys, because 10-year horizon, you could probably survive. I certainly did in 2000 and 2008. There's no doubt about it. The way fractional reserve banking works and leverage, it'll come back, but not on my terms. So I have to know how to do the OODA.
OODA loop. That's right.
The most important step is act. Don't just sit there and clench your hands. That's not going to do it. The stress is a call for action, and you got to take action. Get rid of the stress so you can sleep at night. And that's kind of my deal. I got to be able to sleep well at night. I'm always going to be agitated, because we know the nature of trading. You never sized enough going up in the green, and you size too much and you go down in the red. So what are the odds you're going to be agitated? Pretty much 24/7.
Yeah, pretty much.
So be good with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We always had I guess if you've seen any old like any submarine movies, kind of the equivalent of the chief of the boat. Whenever he came on watch, he would always go and do all of his checks and everything before he'd take over the watch. And part of that is you go and see the navigator. So you figure out where are we going, what are we doing? Because it's only really the navigator and the captain that knows where we're going, really. So he just wants a rough idea, like, what have we got? Is there anything coming up that I need to know about? And part of that is they check the depth of water. So something that he always did. So where he would be sat next to me, so I'd have the panel, which was all the electrical equipment and everything, all the propulsion and stuff all up in front of me. So the panel in front of me was maybe I don't know, about 6 feet high, sort of from chest level up. And he had this tiny little paper submarine that his daughter had made him. And what he'd do is the first thing, not everybody did it, this was his thing. As soon as he come in and took the watch, he would get a blue board marker pen, and right at the top of the panel, he'd squiggle a blue line. So that was the ocean. So that was the surface. Then down at the bottom, he'd get another pen. I don't know what color he used, but green, even though the bottom of the ocean's not green, but he'd squiggle green down there. So if you imagine that's 6 feet, and he's like, right, okay, so we're at 100 meters and the depth of water is 3,100 meters. So he'd put the equivalent, the little submarine right at the top, a couple of inches from the top. And that was it. So that's what he'd say. He's like, right, we've got the watch. This is us for 8 hours. If we fuck up, that's where we go.
That's beautiful. And you know what you're talking about there, Chris, is something that's fascinated me over the years with our technology. You can imagine the changes in the controls and displays. So your panel sounds a lot like what a flight engineer would have, because he'd have all the systems. And, you know, I was a flight engineer on a 747 with UPS, and they weren't 6 feet high, but they were pretty close, about 4 feet tall and, you know, 3 feet wide of stuff that you just had to monitor, and you had to run the fuel, which was pretty important because you didn't want to get that out of balance. Same thing with flying the B-52. The co-pilot, he was had the whole entire fuel panel in front of him, and there was so much fuel that you could move around. It was unbelievable, but you had to do it. Follow the sequence to run the fuel so you don't fall out of the sky, kind of thing. So in the controls and displays, what fascinated me, you know, we have rudimentary flight instruments that are necessary, you know, airspeed, altitude, heading, where are you and where you're going, kind of thing. But when the B-2 was being developed, you know, you ever want to get a culture shock, try getting some pilots, operators, talking to engineers. Oh my gosh, it is a culture you would not believe. Well, in our lumbering acquisition process, I love the Canadian ways of saying that. And I'm good with dialects, by the way. I don't make fun of them. Traveling worldwide, I'm happy to talk.
I love it.
Understand me, you know?
I love it.
So what was fascinating to me, going from the B-52 to the B-2, the engineers were given this document. It's called an ORD, Operational Requirements Document. And this is just a bunch of, we need this airplane to do this and this. We need altitudes here. We need airspeeds here. And so what we got in the early stages of B-2, as I witnessed at Edwards Air Force Base, as they were flight testing it, the engineers did what was required, but what they put on our displays was a static number for airspeed, a static number for altitude. Yeah. Now, when you're flying, you don't want to spend a lot of eyeball time reading an airspeed. You need something else called trend. You need this little wheel, whether it's a dial with a needle that goes, like that. But to get all these important parameters, like reading a newspaper, that was a disaster. The workload was too much to try to figure out what are my flight parameters. Yeah. And so even though the engineers did what was required, it was unsuitable and ineffective for the operator. So we had to spend, a nice healthy bucket of money to fix that into something that would work. And because of the secrecy, the engineers literally reinvented the wheel without what they call COT, commercial off-the-shelf equipment, that the wheel's already been invented.
Right.
Picked it off a Boeing or Jeppesen, but you had to go make your own wheel. And that was a little frustrating to watch, but it was just fascinating to watch how a little change in the controls and displays can greatly decrease your workload. So I tailor that, the the advances in the technology of controls and displays to what's available today. And, I thought, wow, this trade station is really neat, but I'm seeing guys with trading view and these other platforms, and then these algos, and I'm scratching my head thinking, is this an edge that I really want to get involved with? I mean, I see these neat displays on Twitter all the time, and I'm fascinated with it. And I'm just wondering if that gives you an edge, being cognizant of these other parameters that, there are parameters that are seen and unseen on the charts, right? So price is everything. We know that. And well, moving averages are effective because they're simple and they're big, shiny objects. Well, how do you use them? You can use them as a signal or as a trigger. A trigger is the acting part. You're going to buy or sell. So that's fascinating to me. There's probably so many ways to make it work, but you got to tailor it to your own personality, your own tolerances. You can go read the Gem croissant guy. The dude is super smart, but he's on the market maker side, and that's foreign to me. I'm on the buy side, he's on the sell side. And so he's going to look at the market differently. And do I really want to go down that rabbit hole? Well, I have to decide, is that a good use of my time? And
it's something that I'm going through. Well, I go through it all the time. I don't know whether it's just me or whether it's obviously when I was going to sea, I'd take one bag, and that was me for 4 months. And so you had to only take what you needed, and that was it. There's only so much space, right? So I go through these phases, and talking with Rob, like I will pick something to go and learn, and I will try and learn as much as I can. But just as important for me at the end is going back and saying, right, I now know that it's there. I know that other people are using it, but I'm not using it every day. But I've done the work. I have a basic understanding of it. I know it exists. It's just not important for me, or it might not, or at the moment, it's not important for me. Maybe some point in the future, I'll go right, I have to go back to that because actually it's really important and I need to spend more time on it. But there's so much time, so I kind of go through these phases where I'll learn something really deep and then come back, and I'll try and cut everything back down again. And whether it's, sometimes if I'm doing some of this research, I'll cut back and I'll say, right, I'm only going to trade these 5 things, and I'm just going to spend just 5 assets. That's it, nothing else, because I know that I need to go and focus somewhere else. So I'm not going to be looking at like 100 different things, because I'll screw it up. Either I'll screw the research up because there's too much going on, or I'll screw the markets up because I'm not paying it enough attention that it needs.
Yeah, well, and we've talked about this a lot, Chris, in terms of like understanding the different triggers, Rich. I think it's so important because, it helps with the timing piece, right? So if you know that, okay, if a 60-40 allocator, if that's kind of rebalance is happening, let's just say at the end of the quarter. So we need to understand kind of what does that asset allocation look like, and where might it be interested in rotating to, or like rebalancing basically stuff that's underweight and things that are overweight. Same thing to your point in terms of like the market makers, right? And what does that look like from a hedging standpoint, and leveraging the options piece of things, and as a result, where is like the magnetic line where like kind of where the price might get kind of attracted to, right? So whether it's 4,200 or 4450, 4150, whatever it is, right? So like where are those levels? I think, and again, like knowing where they are is one thing, and for me it's just it becomes a piece of the overall puzzle, right? So kind of like the overall picture on my screen is like, okay, I know this is probably what's impacting and why the price action is going here. Here's where another thing that I kind of need to think about in, maybe at the, as we come up to the end of the month, here's another component that, might influence XYZ, whether it's volatility or what have you, right? So, having all those pieces, but then also understanding, okay, what am I going to actually deploy? Like, what do I need? What what pieces of those puzzles am I going to bring in to my process to help me execute more efficiently, better, more consistently? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? It's, it's the consistency, it's the compounding of the capital, the preservation of the capital, and kind of making the best decision in the moment. As you said, like that OODA loop, right? The OODA loop's always a challenge. Sometimes it's more challenging than others because of the environment that we're, depending on the environment that you're in, but it's always about making that best decision you can.
No doubt.
Yeah. Awesome. Was there anything else, Rich, kind of on your mind that you want to
all of my notes on what I wanted to.
Wonderful.
Everybody knows the 7 P's, right? So prior proper planning prevents piss poor performance. So that applies flying, trading, and whatever you do. Chris, since you asked, my longest flight was 36.6 hours with 5 air refuelings.
Wow.
5. Wow.
2 people, some good drugs for go pills, some good drugs for sleeping along the way. So that was one of the combat missions we flew.
Is that one of the pictures you shared with me, or your feeling?
That
might have been a different one.
That was way back in '95. The B-2
Okay.
was called Block 10, very rudimentary, but we got to go to the Paris Air Show, and I got to fly it back from there. And then we were met with one of the French fighters off our wing. So that's where that picture came from.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
And the other one was the B-52 refueling. We would do these maneuvers called the whiff, and to see the wing going 90 degrees to the ground, that's pretty amazing. It's just a gentle whiffer deal where we were able to do that because I was a CFII, which is like an instructor's instructor. So I did that at Castle Air Force Base in California. But on the combat, just a real quick story for you on putting it all together. It was 2003. It was Iraqi freedom. So we flew the B-2s from Whiteman all the way to Iraq. We could not overfly Turkey, so that increased our sortie duration, added another 5 hours. So that added another tanker. To do air refueling, that's another skill set that takes a lot of, you got to put the quarters in the machine, get the hand motor skills ready. So I had plenty of time behind a boom. And what happened during my mission, we got all the way over to, you talk about your phases of flight, Chris. The air refueling, you're going to be pumped up. And then afterwards, you're just cruising. So there's kind of a withdrawal. But because you are not in country, you have all these communications going on, target changes, contingencies. It's a brainful. So some guys, one guy's flying, the other guy's the mission commander who's taking care of the mission. And you're either in a formation, you probably have 2 or 3 in the formation. So you have formation integrity, and then you have mission impacts on what you're doing. So wouldn't it be my luck that right before ingress, which means just before you go into enemy territory, heard a thump and got the bad advisory on my warning caution advisory panel. And then I ended up having to shut down an engine. Well, when you shut down an engine, you're not going to drop bombs. And so we're fully loaded. So I had to follow the rules, shut it down, loiter, wait till my cellmate got to drop his bombs, came back. And then now here I am, literally 15 hours away from home, where I could have diverted. We had divert bases in rather inhospitable places, let's just say, or could have gone to Diego Garcia. And since I had contact with the home base through this secure comm, I'm just saying, hey, this is what I have. I'm going to try to go refuel. And there's more friendly diverts if I come home, even though that's a longer flight, or I could go to Diego Garcia, but that's a lot of water with no option. And the B-2 has 4 engines. I'm flying on 3. And remember how I said they're installed so that the engines aren't exposed? Well, that takes away some thrust when it's called installed. And so it's smoothly shrouded, and then the thrust is going out. So you lose some thrust there. And I'd never refueled the 3 engines. And so at the first refueling, couldn't get a contact. I'd get there and I'd do 3 times, just could not get a contact, and say, man, this is not going to be good if I can't refuel. And went over and over, got flustered. And then finally the tanker pilot just said a very innocuous phrase. He said, is there anything we can do to help? I said, you son of a bitch, I've been working my ass off and you're telling, what the hell? And I just went back out of the moment, went big picture. And then all of a sudden, all of the training that I had ever done my entire career finally landed on my lap. I said, yeah, you can help. Let's start a toboggan. And so a toboggan is a maneuver that we don't practice very often, but we sure practice at my previous assignment at Castle Air Force Base. And what that is, the tanker pilot has to kick off his autopilot, which is kind of a big deal. And then what he'll do is he'll bring his throttles back and start a slight descent. Well, what that does, it increases my thrust available. And then I was able to get a contact on the toboggan. But had he not said that, it's very possible I would not have thought about that. So it's just an amazing right time at the right moment.
For sure.
I kind of used my entire training, and then we came up with a solution. And it was quite a impact for me personally, saying, you go through all this daily grind and all this training, you never know when it's going to work for you.
It's one of those things as well. If you hadn't have had the level of experience that you had, and maybe he felt comfortable enough to ask you because he had a certain level of experience, or it could have all
he asked exactly the right question at the right time. It couldn't have been better.
Yeah,
it was just amazing. And
do you think he could sense that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I know it. I know. He said, yeah, you took care of it. And so then I got the word back to everybody else, hey, tell these tankers, I got 2 more refuelings to get home. We're going to need a toboggan. And so they knew about it ahead of time, and it was smooth sailing after that.
Because it's awesome. One of those, it's one of, I always had it when, I don't know whether they go to a certain school. It's like, so in terms of rank, to take over a boat or to take over a ship, you go from being an XO, so as a second in command, to being the captain, and you go away for a period, and then you come back to get your, to take over a ship. And then I had so my XO of my very first submarine was a prick. He was insane. He was just such a hothead. Just everything would just be like, no matter what, it would just be, everything would just be oh God, anything that went wrong, he just lost it. And then in the space of 6 years and coming back and being given his 3rd stripe and taking command of a submarine, it was like a completely different person. I don't know what it was.
Now you got to trust your subordinate.
Exactly. So now he's in the position where, you've got it. It's your boat. You can fling it around however you want. But him being, so when you're the XO, you're basically the captain, but without the title, because you are in charge of everything. And it's the captain oversees you to make sure you don't fuck up. So then when you get that 3rd stripe and you take over the boat, it's you, then you have to kind of take a little step back, let everyone do their job. And he just completely mellowed out. And he was just like that. He would just, 6 years before, he would have just been throwing everything and going insane. But he had that knack now of he could just ask the right question. He'd come into the room, he'd take a briefing, do whatever. And then he'd just say, he wouldn't tell you what to do. He would just ask the right question and then leave. And then it's like, oh yeah. Okay, yeah.
It's a leadership style. So you have your micromanagers who just make life miserable. Then you have the delegators who, hey, you have it, do your thing. Let me know if I need to know anything.
Yeah.
And that just seems to work a lot better.
It's and in a way, it's almost every time I got promoted, from day one of being promoted, you're already doing everything you have to do for your next promotion.
Absolutely. And, the culture of, the captain being God, I don't know if you all know it or not, but when we were flying in the 50s and 60s, there was a real culture problem where the captain was a demigod. You did not question him. What he said was absolute gospel. Mm-hmm. And he ran the plane exactly. He flung that ship around however he wanted. And that's what happened. And what happened during the 70s, we started getting more calamitous airplane crashes. And we're saying, what the heck is going on? We have the best technology now. Our planes are reliable. What's going on? And they discovered this crew resource management part of the culture where the captain was so highly regarded that people were afraid to give him the proper inputs. Yeah. That's what happened.
Yeah.
And so there's a big push to kind of open up the channels of communication so that, whoever you were on whatever task you were doing, you were not afraid to tell a captain what you are seeing and recommend something. And then the captain got training to say, hey, we know you're God and all that, but you got to come on down to earth and work with your crew a little bit. And so through the years, that's improved. And hopefully we don't have any crew problems contributing to accidents.
Part of qualifying to be a submariner, you have to, there's a big task book and everything you have to do before you get your dolphins. And part of my day was taking new lads, chefs and stewards around and showing them how a nuclear reactor worked. And it's like everyone has to know it. It doesn't, like, you're not going to be the one there in the pitch black trying to do all the valves in the dark, not being able to see anything, but you need to know what's going on. If you hear things over, if we're at emergency stations or whatever, you need to know, like, oh, I need to do this now because they're doing that. It's like, even if you're not directly involved, you still have to know, you have to know how the sausage is being made.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating to think about. Yeah. And to think about all the different backgrounds that people would have coming into that role. Right. I mean, again, just could be anybody. It could be anybody, to have that role. Right. And then to have that responsibility on top of it, beyond just their day-to-day duties. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Because
you got to be careful signing up in the military saying, oh, well, I want to be a chef. You're going to be a lot more than a chef. I guarantee you. You're going to be pulling guard duty. You're going to get qualified with some armaments. And you never know, because you can be tasked with anything at any time. And when you think about that, you look at a unionized labor group, you can't touch the workers unless you follow the union rules. But in the military, the mission comes first. Everybody knows that. You can be deployed for 6 months to 2 years within 48 hours of notice, and then off you go.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, that's quite a tribute to our military. And don't forget, it's a volunteer force. It's not a draft like we had in the 60s. So you always got to keep that in mind. And then, be careful who we elect, because the military is under civilian control. And whatever those leaders bring to the table, it will affect the military without a doubt. Rightly or wrongly, that's the way we are, and it's going to work just fine over the years. We'll go through our pendulum swings, good times, bad times, just like anybody else. But it's fascinating I'm really proud of our veterans and our military, because the work environment is just fabulous, and I hope it stays that way.
Well, that's a great way to end it on, Rich. So well done, sir. Thank you again for sitting down with us. It's been an absolute pleasure to kind of, hear some stories, pick your brain about your process, how you kind of have crossed both, or integrated, I guess, both, your background with kind of your day-to-day investing lifestyle, that kind of thing. So thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. And Chris, always a pleasure. We'll be back next week, and perhaps with another guest, although next week is Hedgeye Live. So Yeah, well, Chris and I got to figure out what that looks like. So we don't know yet. Maybe we'll do it together, or we'll do a live version together because Chris is actually coming over from the UK, Rich. So we're going to be able to get to meet up in person, which is going to be really
wonderful.
awesome. Yeah. So
I had to miss out on Hedgeye Live. I'd be there, but I had a family wedding to go to. But maybe I'll make the next one.
Yeah, that sounds
hang out
good.
with you guys.
100%. We would love that. And so again, thank you, Rich. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. My honor.
Yeah.
Thanks for your service, Chris.
Cheers, Andrew. Thank you.